Hello everybody! A while back we talked about beefing up your word count if your manuscript is a bit too short, and now we're flipping the script. I'm tackling 10 tips for trimming your word count if your story is way too long. Writers typically come in two forms, underwriters and overwriters.
Yep.
Underwriters create their first draft in the most bare bones form. The story doesn't have any meat. Whereas overwriters create way too much content. They have to delete words, sentences, and sometimes even entire scenes. Sometimes writers, especially underwriters, assume bigger is better. That's what she said. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case, because the longer a book is, the more expensive it is to publish, at least in physical form. All that paper costs money, which means a hefty book may be a hard sell to traditional publishers. And if you're self-publishing, a hefty book is going to require a higher price in order to cover production costs. This is not to say you should write a short book under all circumstances, but your readers shouldn't be slogging through sentences, paragraphs, or chapters that have no benefit to the overall plot. If overwriting is your problem, I've got the solution. These 10 tips pinpoint the biggest problems overwriters have and how to overcome them so you can produce the cleanest, clearest manuscript possible. Let's get into it.
I'd also add on to that there are people who kind of do a mix of both, which is really bad. And that's usually where they're usually writing things that don't really matter. So they end up overwriting, but they don't really have enough meat to the story anyways. And then they end up underwriting in that regard. For me, I typically underwrite where I am just very straight and direct to the point. And so there's no like, I don't do description a lot when I'm kind of in the zone. I'll just kind of be like, they're in a place and they're going and they're talking and that's it. So a lot of times I have to go back and write in like scene description and stuff.
Today's topic is requested by one of my patrons over on Patreon, Ren Keeling. Ren enjoyed my underwriters video so much and wanted me to give the same attention to overwriters, and I am happy to do so. I'm a recovering overwriter myself, and these tips have saved my ass on more than one occasion. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. You totally want to do just that because I have my very first nonfiction writing craft book, Shut Up and Write the Book, coming out in a few months or so, and I talk about underwriters and overwriters in that book. So definitely subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and be on the lookout for Shut Up and Write the Book. While we're talking about books, The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister are available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. They're available at all major retailers, so if you want to check out this dark fantasy romance, it's an award winner. It was...
Here we go again. So I always want to kind of put this out there that I like Jenna Moreci as I like her videos as a tool for new authors, because a lot of her advice is sound advice, right? But also a lot of her advice is from the standpoint of a plotter, and a lot of her advice is, I think she says it in a way that's kind of like, if you don't do it this way, you're fucked. But she doesn't really mean that. Maybe she does in some cases, but I feel like a lot of times you need to speak with authority on things. So saying like, you know, if you don't do it this way, then you're fucked, is kind of a way to really establish the fact that you have authority in the topic, in the matter, right? Not having that kind of like that presence leads to kind of being like wishy-washy, like, well, I mean, you can if you want to, but I mean, you shouldn't, you know, it's up to you, really, you know, it's up to you if you want to suck, is what that really says. So yeah, sometimes you want to come in and you want to have a voice of authority, and the way to do that is be like, if you're not doing it like this, then you're going to have problems. The problem with that, though, is that her advice when it comes to writing, writing is an art form. Art forms are always very subjective to the individual artist, and she doesn't have that disclaimer. That disclaimer is kind of like, you know, in the background. That's the way I think about it, is like, even though she's saying do it like this, she's really either saying try it like this or do it like this if it works for you. Like, that whole disclaimer is in the background. The other part that I always mentioned is that even though she is an award winner, she was #1 on bestseller on Amazon. That is, see right here, from best-selling author Jenna Moreci. She is a bestseller. This thing sold, right? I've never heard good reviews on either of these books. She also has another one that she never talks about anymore called Eve the Awakening. She doesn't even talk about it anymore. That's an older book. And, you know, one of the things, too, is that book could suck, and that's fine because it was her first published book, and these two are more of her, you know, she's gotten better kind of since, but I have never heard good things about these books. I think that the reason that Year of the Author, Catherine, does these, like, reacts to, she really wants to, it feels like she really wants to do them for Jenna Moreci's videos, but the thing is that, you know, the iWriterly girl and Alyssa Dunn, they also have the same problem where they give writing advice and they don't follow it in their own books. And again, I've never, out of the books that they've published while being, you know, Authortubers, I've never seen a good review other than the occasional ARC review. And that sometimes comes from, like, other Authortubers, where it's like, are they kind of like circling the wagons? Are they kind of just like banding together to make sure that they you know tell their fans that yes, it's good, and they tell their fans that yes, they're good. So they're kind of like helping each other out in that regard. But every book reviewer that I've ever heard talk about these books are either I DNF'd it, I wanted to DNF it, or it was so bad I read it just so that way I could basically talk shit about it, in a sense, right? I've just never heard anything good about these books. You know, it's unfortunate, and I don't think any book is perfect, but I also don't think that Jenna or some of the other Authortubers have like the right type of, or have any kind of excuse. Basically, they are, I don't know about wealthy, but they have very successful Authortube platforms where they get money, they can afford editors, so they can't hide behind. And they also very much promote, like, if you don't have, like, you know, if you don't have an editor, if you didn't have an editor look at your book's not done, you're releasing a draft, not a finished product. So these books, to the best of my understanding, it sounds like they didn't have good critical feedback, good developmental editing, as far as like having an editor to go through to, like, you know, check for punctuation and check for spelling and things. That sounds perfectly fine. But as far as story wise, it's very possible that, you know, being kind of famous might be a double-edged sword, where you have people who want to stay on they want to be the one who's like, yeah, I read Jenna Moreci's books, I'm her critique partner. Yeah, I'm part of Jenna Moreci's beta readers. Oh yeah, I read that book. You know, she took some of my advice. You know, some of my advice made it into the book. That kind of shit. I feel like it's very possible. Not saying it is, but it's very possible that those kind of people are going to give positive feedback just so that way they can stay in that loop, right? Yes, this was so great. Yes, this was amazing. This is all the best. But then when it gets out into the hands of critics, the critics are like, this was utter trash. This was not good. So I'll leave that there. I won't go any further into that on this video. So let's hear her.
The number
let's hear
one
her
bestseller on
her tips.
Amazon. Definitely do so. It's linked below. Now I'm breaking down my 10 tips for trimming your word count to its most vital points. Number 1, filter words. A filter word is a word that filters the action of the novel through the main character's experience, and overwriters are notorious for using the shit out of them. See, feel, think, realize, hear. All of these are filter words.
I'm gonna stop right here. This will probably not reduce your word count. This will probably increase your word count, because when you remove the thing, like, I mean, sure, you could do like, he felt the slimy rail, and then cut out felt, and then it's just like the rail was slimy, basically, right? Like you just go straight into like it was slimy or whatever, right? But a lot of times these words are telling, and it simplifies the sentence. It makes it very short, makes it very easy to convey what we're trying to do, right? But doing it the right way could easily add words. So I guess this one wouldn't be like a for sure it's going to add words. It's kind of a give and take sometimes. This is something that you definitely should be doing. Get rid of these words. These words should not be in your book unless they're like dialogue. Or unless you want to tell the audience rather than actually show them, you want to tell them something, which is bad, then these should not be in your book. So definitely get rid of them. Definitely replace them with showing rather than telling.
Sometimes they're unavoidable and you gotta use them, but more than half the time, you don't need them.
More than half the time? Jenna? It's more like 90 to 95% of the time. Let's be real. Okay? When I read manuscripts and they are chock full of this shit, it sucks. I start getting upset. And I've mentioned this before, where the idea, I understand the idea. It's usually that as a writer, we're focusing on our main character, and we're saying like, it's kind of like we think of like as a camera. The page is like the camera lens, and we're looking at the main character, and they realize that their car is on fire, right? So you're watching the main character, and then the main character turns, and then the camera pans, and then they see the car on fire, and so it's like they realize their car is on fire outside. That is one of those things where that's how we think about it. So then we write it that way, but that's not how we really want to do that, right? The character woke up is where, like the character woke up out of a deep sleep because they were smelling smoke, is where the camera is on them. And then when we go over here, it's not that they realize that, we see them turn, and then we see the car on fire. It's the car's on fire. Because if the car is, if you don't say that on the page, then the character doesn't know. But if we say that on the page, the character knows. That's all it is, She woke up. The smell of smoke heavy in the air. Her car's on fire outside. Holy shit. So it's not half the time. It's like, again, you can say these words in dialogue, and even then I still kind of argue that, like, if you're having a character describe something verbally, right? They're like, I felt his hand on my back. Technically, yes, people say that, but we still want to be better than like the real world. We want to be realistic, but we want to be better. It's like, it's like a movie. It's like, we're giving the most important bits, and we're focusing on those most important bits, and it's technically unrealistic, but at the same time it's realistic enough, right? So when a character describes feeling something out loud, we still want to give them like a higher vernacular, and having them say things in a way that technically they might not normally really say it. Like they might just go, ooh, gross. But really in the book, they're going to be like, oh, it's so slimy. It feels like grease. What is this, right? That might be more what they say. In real life, they would just go, ew, gross. It's just disgusting, right? That might be all that they say. So having them be more clear as to what's going on can sometimes be the right thing. Having them say, you know, feel, felt, realized, whatever. It's okay in dialogue, but still, even in that case, you still want to refrain from overusing it.
When overused, filters distance the reader from the story and ruin the immersion, on top of adding a bunch of useless words to the story. Fortunately, filter words are really easy to delete. She heard birds chirping overhead could instead be written as birds chirped overhead. He felt mud caking his body.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want, and you never need to pick up a camera or use...
Could be written as mud caked his body. See how easy it is? In one quick step, you have eliminated a filter word, improved your story's immersion.
Yes, however, okay, here's the thing. Usually when we're going for that kind of thing, especially with felt, when we're saying like he felt mud cake his body, what we're really trying to convey to the reader is the feeling of mud caking their body. We want the reader to really feel that, right? Saying mud caked his body is technically just telling them that mud caked his body, right? We're not exactly evoking the senses with that, right? We are giving information, okay? But if we say, you know, the mud weighed down on him or something like that, right? Like we give some sort of actual feeling, right? It's not just the mud caked his body. It's like the wet, slimy mud weighed on his shoulders, pulling him down into the swamp, something like that. That tells us that it's slimy. Maybe we add like it's cold, right? We give these other indicators to really give the idea of what it feels like. And that's going to add words. So that's why I'm saying, like, yes, you can just do what she said right there. And I do that too. I do that. What she said is correct 100%, but it's also not the entirety. If you want to cut words, that is a way to do it, just by saying what it is. Mud caked his body. Okay. But if you're trying to evoke the feeling of mud caking their body, then you need to really describe that. And that takes extra words.
And trim down your word count. Number 2, repetition. If your manuscript is surpassing 200,000 words, I can guarantee you are repeating the shit out of yourself. Back in my critiquing days, I once read...
Not always, but go ahead.
A section of someone's way too long manuscript, and in a single chapter, they referenced the main character's sea green eyes 6 times. We get it. They're green.
Every single one of these books. Some more. Well, not every single one of the books. Some of them are 100 something plus thousand, but a lot of these books are 200 plus thousand words.
Green. I'm not saying.
Now, one thing about this is that if you only have like a couple characters, then yeah, a lot of these books are dealing with multiple characters. So we have to be reiterating that, like, you know, because you haven't been with this character for like 3 chapters or maybe even longer, right? They had a chapter here and then now it's been 10 chapters and now they're back, right? So yeah, you do reiterate. Oh my God, this gnat. Gotcha, bitch. You do reiterate that their eyes are sea green or whatever, right? But also too, just so that people don't misunderstand that idea, is you do want to reiterate a character's pronounced features, right? So if a person has, you know, like one of my characters has vibrant green eyes, I refer to them as emeralds a lot. That is a way to really instill in the reader that those eyes are that color, right? But more so too, that the other character looking at them is really like taking notice of them, right? So like whenever it says like, you know, she glanced at him, he's just really noticing that she's looking at him, right? But if it's like, you know, her emerald eyes locked on him, now he's making direct eye contact, or he's looking at those eyes, right? So yeah, it depends on what you're really trying to do, but it's just one of those things where you do want to reiterate what a character looks like, so that way you keep them in your reader's head. Don't beat them over the head with it, right? There's moderation involved, but it does happen more with these books because, number one, you have a larger cast that you have to describe what they look like, and number two, because there can be swaths of chapters where the character is just not there, when you come back to them, you're going to probably have to remind the reader what they look like, you know? So, you know, it is what it is.
You should only mention a character's eyes once, but 6 times in one chapter?
Yeah, in one chapter is overkill, right? In one chapter, in like their introduction chapter, maybe you say what their eyes look like twice because you're introducing them for the first time, but then also later on in the chapter, you're reinforcing that trait. That's fine. But yeah, 6 times in one chapter would be overkill.
It doesn't create a better visual, it just annoys the reader and comes across as self-indulgent. Another time I read a love confession that was over a page long, which is really unnecessary because there's only so many ways you can say I love you. Go through your manuscript and look for these useless moments of repetition. I know you got them. Delete the repeats that add no value to your story and move on. Number 3, filler. If you're an overwriter, you've got filler in your story. I'm sorry, but it's true. Filler is defined as any chapter or scene that does not move your plot forward in some way. For example, I once read a romance novel that had an entire chapter.
I'd also note that even if you're an underwriter, there's a very high chance that you have filler in your rough draft. Just because you didn't make a whole lot of words doesn't mean that none of them are filler.
Devoted to the main character's workout routine. This did not pertain to any of the plots or subplots, which means it's filler. That doesn't mean you can't mention the character's workout routine, that's fine, but we don't need an entire scene or chapter devoted to her reps and heart rate. It's totally unnecessary. But Jenna, this scene isn't pointless, it's character development. What have I told you? Your character is supposed to develop through the plot. If you're not sure if a scene is filler, it's simple enough to figure out. Imagine the scene has been removed from your manuscript entirely. Can the story still be told with ease, or have you completely fucked up the trajectory of your plot? If your answer is the latter, the scene can stay, and if it's the former, the scene's gotta go. Number 4.
Yeah, so I definitely agree on that. When it comes to any scene, it has to move the plot forward. It can't just serve for character development, right? So if you have a scene, now I do kind of worry with what she's talking about as far as a scene that is really not, because I have seen that scene that she's kind of talking about where it's like it's a character's workout routine. That is character development, but it's also plot development in the way that I have seen it done. I've also seen it done badly, but I've seen it done well where it's more like this. It's not just to show you who this person is, it's also to show you what their life is. Her life is she goes to the gym, she works out, and she works really hard. It's not just kind of like a warm up, it's not like a breeze. This person is intending to get jacked, you know, like they want to get ripped, and now you know that this is their normal, right? They're doing this every day. Maybe they've been only doing it for the past few months or whatever. Maybe they've been doing it for the past few years. You know, you kind of you give that indication. But a scene like that, if it serves both plot and character, it's fine. But if you take it out and it doesn't, like she said, if you take it out, it doesn't do anything to the story, then you're fine. A lot of times, though, I have seen writers are like, I can't take it out because of this little piece right here, little piece. I can't. if it's a few pieces of the scene that you need, you can think about it, use your brain. You can figure out how to get that in there, and without having to do the scene, you can rework it to get it in the book somewhere else. It's a puzzle. You got to work out the puzzle.
4. Passive voice. The wall was covered in pictures versus pictures covered the wall. He was chased by dogs versus dogs chased him. In both of these examples, the first sentence is passive voice and the second one is active voice. Passive voice is typically something you want to avoid. It usually reads less clear than active voice, plus it loads up your sentence with tons of extra words. In rare occasions, the passive voice reads as better than active voice, or passive voice cannot be avoided, but again, this is uncommon. Locate all the instances of passive voice in your manuscript.
It's almost, again, this is like one of those 90-95% kind of things where you can get rid of so many of these words. You can get rid of so many of them. And again, don't use dialogue as like a cheat way out, right? Yes, in dialogue, it's much more forgivable, right? 'Cause that's how we talk. But in dialogue, you still want to make your dialogue more punchy. You still want to make it mean more. You still want to have it feel more to the reader, right? So having them use like was and all those kind of passive verbs is, try to get rid of every single one, because some of us are going to slip through. I say shoot for 100%, get rid of all of them. But the thing is that you're not going to succeed. Let's just be real. And there's going to be a few that make it through. And there it is. It's okay.
It can be changed to active voice. I guarantee you will cut down your word count. Number 5, the extras. A lot of writers are addicted to teeny tiny words that aren't necessary to their sentences. The most common addictive extra is the word that. I'm sure you can think of tons of situations where that is necessary. Please don't think I am telling you to delete every appearance of that in your book. It's just quite often that sneaks into sentences when it's not needed. For example, take the sentence, "She wished that she could fly." Guess which word doesn't need to be there? That. She wished she could fly is grammatically correct. Stop throwing in words that don't belong. Number 6.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Pacing. Is your story reading at too slow of a pace? Chances are you've added too many words that don't belong. To quicken the pace, utilize shorter sentences. That doesn't mean all of your sentences need to be short, but a good chunk of them should be. Additionally, learn when to tell and when to show. We don't need unimportant details like transitions or time skips shown to us. Instead, utilize tell and move on. But most importantly, stop painting every teeny tiny detail, especially in fast-paced scenes. Say you're writing a fight scene. We don't need every single maneuver explained to us. This will only bog down the pace and make it seem as though the fight scene is happening in slow motion. Instead, describe the moves that matter, the action that creates the biggest punch. He grabbed the hilt of his sword with his right hand, raising it forward and piercing the knight through the belly. Who fucking cares which hand he used or the direction of his sword? Get those extra descriptions out of here. He grabbed his sword and pierced the knight through the belly. It illustrates the same idea, but
I would say he doesn't even need to grab his sword. Obviously, if he's piercing the knight through the belly, like, it's obvious he has the sword in his hand, right? So he pierced the knight in the belly with the sword.
At a more exciting pace and with fewer words. Number 7, description. Setting the scene is imperative for every scene you write, but you can do this without barfing.
Now, I would also say there is, when it comes to fight scenes and really any of that, like, the pacing, the sentence that she gave is perfectly fine too. It depends on kind of where you're loading it up, right? Like, the pacing really matters as far as like where you want your punch to be. So, like in the example I gave, it was like sudden, like basically he was already stabbed, right? The guy was stabbed, right? The other one is more like a little bit of a lead up. He grabbed the sword and punctured the knight in the belly. The other one is he punctured the knight in the belly, so it just happens right away with a sword. So yeah, there's arguments for either way, just depending on where you want your oomph to be and how soon you want it. If you want to delay it some, and that all has to do with pacing.
Up useless descriptions. We don't need the square footage of your character's house or the placement of every piece of furniture. We don't need the blueprint of a castle or the exact height of its walls. These details do not create better visuals, they just confuse and overwhelm the reader.
Yeah.
Instead, utilize your five senses and describe color, texture, and ambiance. Is the furniture made of polished mahogany? Are the walls covered in pink floral wallpaper? These descriptions are visual and transportive, plus they don't overwhelm the reader and they don't bog your manuscript down with useless words. Number 8. Adverbs. The road to hell is not paved in adverbs, but adverbs certainly won't get you into heaven. More often than not, adverbs describe actions, and the reason they're frowned upon is because actions usually describe themselves. You don't need to say that a character ran quickly, because running is quick in itself. That's the entire point. Overwriters tend to abuse adverbs, so
Yeah, and I would also say that, like, if what you mean is like he ran really fast, like it was a very fast type of run, sprint, right? There are other words that mean like the higher impact of what you're talking about.
I encourage you to go through your manuscript, highlight every adverb, and ask yourself, is this necessary?
For anyone who doesn't know, most adverbs are going to be ly words. So if you find an ly word, again, you can probably cut it out. I typically see them the most on dialogue, like, you know, he whispered softly, he shouted vigorously or something. I don't know. But I typically see them in a way like to explain how they. Like, a lot of times it's like he said, and then they go into like a description of how he said it, right? And they use ly words a lot there. So, but again, a lot of times there are words that you could use instead that will get your point across.
If a character is speaking flirtatiously, you don't need the adverb because the dialogue itself should make the flirting clear. But if they're smiling flirtatiously, the adverb might be helpful because there are a zillion different kinds of smiles and we don't know which one they're using. Now, if a character walks flirtatiously, maybe there's a better verb you can use here that would eliminate the adverb entirely. For example, strut, swagger, or sachet. As you can see, there are some situations where an adverb is necessary, but most of the time, a good, powerful...
I would even say in the idea of, like, they smiled flirtatiously, yes, you could use that. Could you describe what that actually looks like, though? Typically, when it comes to ly words, any kind of adverbs, I usually say that if you've described what it looks like before, like if you've described how they smile flirtatiously before, like, you know, it's just one side. It's just, right? The other side's not really going anywhere. It's just one side smiling. Their eyes, narrow, or, you know, it's a tilt of their head, right? It's not like, hi, it's, right? It's like that. Describe that the first time, probably even the second time. On the third time, though, you could probably get away with saying flirtatiously, because now as the reader, I know what that is for that character, right? For that character. So if you do it, like if you have different characters smiling flirtatiously, that doesn't, not everyone smiles the same way flirtatiously, right? Some people look like idiots. The same character smiling flirtatiously here in chapter 1, chapter 3, and then chapter 5. Chapter 5 and on, you can probably get away with saying flirtatiously a couple of times before you need to re-describe it. Not because you need to re-describe it because they don't know what it looks like, but more just because using flirtatiously over and over again is probably pretty bad. So, yeah, basically, if you've described what it looks like before, in later chapters, you can use these words to just tell the audience what it looks like or what they're doing because they know what it looks like since we've already described it to them.
Verb will do the trick. This will improve your writing, create clearer visuals, and trim your word count. Number 9, info dumping. This is for all the Sanderson wannabes out there.
For those of us who have been here the entire time, let us not forget her advice on villain monologue. That villain monologues are okay if they're told to a auxiliary character and the main character just overhears it. No.
If you're a fantasy or sci-fi writer and your manuscript is way too long, I'm gonna wager you have some info dumps scattered about, especially in the first few chapters. An info dump is exactly what it sounds like. It's a massive chunk of exposition that is used to explain some facet of the world or its history. Sometimes info dumps can't be avoided, but they should be in limited supply, and you should make them as short as possible. If you've surpassed a page, you need to shut the fuck up real quick. If you're not sure if your info dump is necessary, ask yourself the same thing you did with filler. If you removed this section, could your readers still follow your manuscript without issue or confusion? If the answer is yes, delete the dump. Remember, you only need to explain the world or its history.
It is Halloween. Give us something to scream about.
If it pertains to the plot. If it doesn't, it's gotta go.
So what I'll say about this is that for newer writers, when it is just like she said, in the sense of ask yourself, do they need this information right now, right? If there's any part of it that they do need, then just use that. If they don't need this entire big, huge block, or they need this little bit here at the beginning, then cut the rest of it out. Use it somewhere later, right? Try to figure out where you can take this block of text and just take the chunks out and put them in when they're needed, right? In the beginning, it's not going to feel right. You're going to feel like, man, but it'd be so much easier if I just told them all of this right now. But it's going to be bad. They're not going to like it. What I hate though is when I'm giving my book over to critique partners or beta readers and there's no info dump. And they're in chapter 1. And they're like, man, I wish I knew how the magic system worked. We're not even there yet. What are you talking about? Calm down. Calm it down. Hate that. But yes, don't do info dumps, even if you feel like, now's the time, and break it apart as much as you can and sprinkle it through, because otherwise, if you just go off of her advice, this is the problem I'm seeing that can come up, is that people will info dump later, right? Oh, they don't need to know all of this now. Well, then I'll just save it for here, right? And it's still an info dump, though. It's still an info dump. So figure out what parts of it they need. And then also, too, if you're like, well, they need it now. They need all of this right now. Okay, if they need all of it now, then we need to spread this out. We need to take pieces and put them in earlier, so that way it comes across as a more natural flow, rather than all this stuff is happening right now, but then also I need to just remind you guys, I just want to let you guys know that on my planet, the magic is more of an inherent system with these kind of flaws, and if you use this kind of magic, then it can really hurt you. But it's like, we don't need that right now, and if we do need it, then we needed it sooner, right? We needed it sooner. So when it comes to info dumps, we definitely don't want to do them. Typically the biggest info dump that I see, that's it is still an info dump, but it's also not like as egregious or like annoying of an info dump as kind of like plot description, is the info dump of scene description. where not plot description, excuse me, world building. That's the most common one that is like we don't want it. But the most common one that kind of slides through is scene description, where we go into a room and you describe it from corner to corner to corner to corner, right? We see the whole thing. What I say is, when it comes to scene description, you really want to more is less in that, broad strokes, like noting that there's paintings on the wall. And even if you wanted to note, like, there's landscape paintings on the wall, that's fine. Just one extra word, landscape paintings, who cares? But otherwise, besides those broad strokes, when you want to get down closer or more to more detail, really only name the things that are really going to matter, right? There's a scene that I did a video for where I talk about how I originally wrote it and then how I edited it, because basically I noted that there's a piano and that mattered. The piano comes into play later on. There's a bookshelf, that mattered. It comes into play later on. There are couches. One of them gets used, so it matters. It gets used later on. And then there was this desk with like writing utensils, like a quill and ink underneath the window. That didn't matter. So that could just go, right? And all that information, the books, the couch, the piano, I didn't need to do it all in one go, right? Could easily add in the piano later, right? They come into the room. The first thing that they see are the chairs or the couch, and then also just notate that, like, one of the walls is just covered in books. Boom, you're done there. And then later on, mention that there's a piano in there. During their dialogue, he got up and moved over to the piano. Okay, so there's a piano in there, and then later on have the payoff to like why the piano really mattered, that kind of stuff. So when you're doing your descriptions, really limit it down to broad strokes, and the details need to really come into play at some point during the scene. If they don't, broad strokes.
Last but not least, number 10, the roundabout. AKA writing your sentences in the most roundabout manner. She extended her arm so that she could pick up her glass of wine. So many words to explain the simplest action. You don't need that shit. First of all, we've got some unnecessary words in there. So that she could. You don't need that. So she could is perfectly fine on its own. Similarly, her glass of wine could instead be written as her wine glass. Same message, fewer words. But even with those changes, this sentence is way too roundabout. She extended her arm so she could pick up her wine glass. Listen, if she's picking up her wine glass, we can already assume she's extending her arm. No one is picking up a wine glass like this. Hold on. Oh. Okay, we got it. We got the wine. Thus, this sentence could be written as, she picked up her wine glass. Not only is it shorter, it's a lot clearer because readers aren't slogging through unnecessary words. You're getting to the point, which creates a clearer visual.
That's one of those things where, if it matters to the plot that she needs to extend to pick up the wine glass, right? Like she stretched out to her wine glass. She didn't really pick it up yet because otherwise it wouldn't really matter. But if she extends out to get her wine glass and then, like, someone cuts her arm off, that matters, right? It matters that she's extending to get her wine glass. Again, though, very situational, right? I'm only describing the fact that she's extending her arm out just so that way I can lop it off in 2 seconds, right? Otherwise, 100% correct here. There's no need for all those words.
Trims your word count and allows your reader to get to the content that matters. So that's all I got for you today. Thank you to Ren for requesting today's topic. If you'd like the chance to have a video topic dedicated to you, or if you want access to tons of other awards, check me out on Patreon. You get early access to my videos. We have a monthly live stream. There is an exclusive writing group just for patrons. You also get signed books. It's so much fun. I got it linked below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister are available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. So if you like yourself some award-winning dark fantasy romance, definitely check this series out. They're linked below. And be sure to follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, and BookBub. And of course, you can tweet me at Jenna Moreci. Bye!
It's me, Pippa! Have you subscribed to Jenna's channel yet?
Who is this?
Oh, you
Pippa?
must. It's so much fun. She talks about writing and heroism.
Shh.